Good morning. You're watching All You Need to Know on Bloomberg Quint Live, and I'm Alex Matthew. First, the headlines this morning. Shares in Asia declined following an overnight slip on Wall Street after the 10-year Treasury yield touched its lowest in more than a year. UK Prime Minister Theresa May promises she will quit once the Brexit deal is delivered if her colleagues support her deal. US and China resume high-level trade talks this week as they close in on a deal that could just be the first step in the long road to economic peace. Heineken buys Vijay Mallya's 2.8% stake in United Breweries. The stake had been pledged to banks. And S&P cuts JLR and Tata Motors credit ratings, citing Brexit worries. Let's talk about that session on Wall Street. US stocks fell on Wednesday after 10-year bond yields fell to their lowest level in more than a year. This in the context of the latest conversation over the past couple of weeks about a global economic slowdown, and those concerns clearly persist. Bloomberg's Ranita Young has all the details in this report.
Here in the U.S., equities are lower with slowing global growth pressuring markets, as well as the U.S. Federal Reserve taking on a dovish tone and weakening data coming out of the U.S. when it comes to housing, U.S. consumer sentiment, as well as retail sales. Now, we did see the oil industry take a slide today. Energy shares in the S&P 500 slid after a jump in U.S. crude oil supplies sent oil plummeting, and the U.S. 10-year Treasury yields fell to the lowest since December 2017, and traders piled into bonds on this slowing global growth concern. The U.S. dollar, however, rose against its major competitors, and the Bloomberg Dollar Index ended higher. However, gold ended lower. Now, we did see a few movers here with Southwest Airlines bringing up Southwest Airlines shares just a little bit, as well as other airlines, after reporting that the damage done, or the damage in financials that was done after the Boeing 737 MAX jetliner grounding was not as impactful, or was not as negatively impactful as investors initially thought it was. Of the 4,000 flights that Southwest makes daily, this amounted for about 130 flight cancellations. So that was less than 4% of flights that were canceled as a result of this mass grounding. However, Boeing said it spent months refining the software of the jetliners after the Ethiopia-Indonesia crashes, and it worked with regulators, and now it has to give regulators a final document for certification. But it must also convince the skeptical regulators of China, Europe, as well as Canada of the system's safety. And that's a look at Wednesday's Wall Street action. In New York, I'm Ranita Young for Bloomberg News.
All right, now high-level U.S. trade negotiators, including U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, are in Beijing to resume trade talks with China today and tomorrow, in fact. Bloomberg's Malcolm Scott tells you what to expect in this report.
I mean, we've got Mnuchin and Lighthizer in Beijing today and tomorrow for further talks. There's then follow-up talks with Liu He, who's the sort of Chinese go-to guy for these talks these days, scheduled to be in Washington from next week. So, you know, the talks are on. The chatter is that perhaps there's, you know, perhaps even if they're close to making some sort of deal on paper, there's still thorny issues outstanding. You know, Mr. Lighthizer and others have talked about some of those, the issues around IT, the issues around enforcement. They seem to be the two sticking points even still. So the question now is, if we do get some sort of deal from the backroom guys, something that Lighthizer, Mnuchin and their Chinese equivalents can agree to, is that the full deal, or is there still going to be questions that only Xi and Trump can really agree to? That's the one issue that's going to keep markets on edge for a little while longer yet. But, you know, hopefully we're getting towards some sort of agreement here.
All right, let's now go straight to all the action that's in Asia this morning, all the markets that have opened so far. Bloomberg's Rosalind Chin is joining us live from the Hong Kong studio. Good morning, Rosalind. How are we looking today?
Unfortunately, the stocks here in Asia do seem to be picking up the negativity from across the way in the US. So mostly looking at a down day here in Asia right now. The MSCI Asia Pacific losing 0.8% at this moment in the session. We've got the Nikkei losing 1.7%, the Topix down by 1.8%, Kospi down by about 1%. Across the board, really pulling lower. Hang Seng Index, of course, just opened a few moments ago, down by 0.4%. Shanghai Composite down by nearly 0.75%, and the CSI down by about 0.5%. Generally, investors are concerned about the global economic outlook. We know that. And of course, we've seen sovereign bond yields across the board pretty much, at least in the major markets, continue to fall, especially in the Asia region. And that's been stoking more concerns, of course. ECB's Mario Draghi also said that an accommodative stance is needed. Of course, so that worry about Europe coming in there as well. There's weakness in the data that we've had recently in the US housing and consumer sentiment. There's also a limit to how dovish the Fed can be and can go, and how far that impact can radiate as well. So we saw this yields on 10-year treasuries hit a 15-month low here in Asia. The Aussie 10-year treasury is continuing to fall to record lows, and Japan at levels not seen since about 2016. And of course, the yen, that's been on the move, strengthening as investors seek out havens. So Brexit concerns, of course, also weighing into those currencies there. There was a vote in Parliament today which rejected all the possible amendments and alternatives to May's Brexit plan. So it looks like the picture is becoming a lot muddier, not clearer, where Brexit is concerned as well. And of course, as you mentioned, the trade talks, which could offer some positivity, those are starting again in Beijing with Robert Lighthizer and Stephen Mnuchin there for more talks. So overall, though, pretty much in the red at this moment in the session. We're looking forward to seeing any other data which is going to come out next week that could actually help lift them a little bit. Back to you.
Thanks so much for that, Rosalind. Well, you know, Rosalind just spoke about this. She spoke about the Brexit, the fact that there's no sign of a breakthrough in the Brexit deadlock. Yesterday, when UK lawmakers failed to agree on an alternative to Theresa May's plan, even as she offered to resign in a desperate attempt to save it. Bloomberg's Kathleen Hayes has more.
She put out a statement saying she's prepared to leave her job early to do the right thing for the country and for the party. She went on to say this in her statement. If we could take a look at that now. I ask everyone in this room to back the deal so we can complete our historic duty to deliver on the decision of the British people and leave the EU with a smooth and orderly exit. So what happened after that? Boris Johnson, one of her big opponents on the deal, former mayor of London, a member of parliament for many years, saying, oh, I'll support it. Ian Duncan Smith, another top conservative, I'll support it too. But the Democratic Unionist Party said, no, we still won't support it. Theresa May needs those votes if she would ever get the vote passed. So that was the end of that. And regardless of what happens with this deal, her future looking more uncertain than ever as we get to this impasse and stay there.
All right, before we go to the trade setup for the day in India, let's take a look at what's making headlines across the globe. Here's Sue Keenan of Bloomberg News.
UK lawmakers, they have voted on a string of Brexit options and failed to support any of them. The saga had earlier seen Prime Minister Theresa May promising to resign if Conservative rebels drop their opposition to her Brexit deal and ratify it. Several hardliners, including Boris Johnson, agreed, but the small Northern Irish party that's propped up the government so far refused to back her deal. Early indicators in China show that the economy is exhibiting further signs of recovery, although pressures remain. A Bloomberg economics gauge says that equities and small businesses are leading the improvement. A trade gauge and a survey of sales managers also signal a broad pickup. An optimism of a trade deal also helps. However, copper prices and factory inflation still point to weakness. U.S.-China trade talks, meanwhile, resume in Beijing later Thursday, with President Trump saying he's anticipating, quote, an excellent deal. The two sides say they have agreed on several broad outlines, but the U.S. side says there are important obstacles remaining, and China is pushing back at some demands it feels are too one-sided. The negotiations will continue in Washington next week. On to Boeing now, and the latest on the MAX jet. It has briefed the aviation industry on its software fix for the 737 MAX, saying it was close to an upgrade before the Ethiopian Airlines crash earlier this month. The plane maker has been refining the software since October's Lion Air disaster, where data indicates a sensor fault repeatedly forced the plane into a dive. However, Boeing says the upgrade proved more complicated than originally thought.
FAA must take steps to reduce hazards associated with flight deck automation. Pilots now rely on automated flight systems as much as 90% of the time. While airlines have long used automation safely, FAA is responsible for ensuring air carriers meet requirements for these systems.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists in more than 120 countries. I'm Sue Keenan. This is Bloomberg.
All right. Well, but on Bloomberg, Quint, we'll tell you all about the Indian markets. Agam Vakil is here to tell you about the trade setup for the day and also what's happening in the futures and options space. Globally, Agam, there's a bit of weakness in commodity, in equities, and everybody's watching bond yields like hawks. How are we looking in India today?
Well, it is expiry, so that is another factor which will play out today. Well, as far as the markets go, well, we are looking at a cut of around 35 points. Moving on to how markets panned out yesterday, well, we did see largely mixed moves. The benchmarks declined, but there was a lot of strength in the broader markets, which explains the up move for the mid-cap and the small-cap indices. The banking index also advancing by around 1.5% as far as the PSU banking index is concerned, 0.5% gains for the Nifty Bank. The ADRs, well, mixed cues coming in, but Tata Motors, of course, down by around 3%. We're going to watch out for that, considering another downgrade coming in, this time from S&P, and this is long-term ratings downgrade. Of course, say for ICICI Bank, most ended in the red. But coming down to your institutional flows, again, that trend of, well, this time around 1,481 crores and 135 crores bought by DIIs too. So there's been buying from both sides of the institutions segment. Of course, IndusInd Bank, Yes Bank and SBI providing some support. On the other hand, Reliance Industries, HDFC Twins and TCS bearing down on the indices. But it is expiry and we're keeping an eye on the rollovers. What we're watching out for is 53% for the Nifty futures and for the Nifty banking futures rollovers, again at around 46%. Now, in terms of average, we really aren't seeing too much of a change there. But in maximum OI, that's shifted to from 11,500 to 11,600. Again, on expected lines, this is on expectations that your expiry will be somewhere around 11,500. Pardon me. But there is more writing around the 11,600 call as we speak. So the India Volatility Index has risen by around 3.5% and moved above the mark of 17. And when it comes to your Nifty put call ratio, that has come off to around 1.5 from 1.6. And in terms of stocks in the F&O band, we have Adani Enterprises and Adani Power. Also, IDBI Bank and Jet Airways. However, we do have Reliance Power, which moves out of the F&O band. And moving on to other stocks that we're watching out for, Torn Pharma, Equitas Holding among many, which have seen an increase in OI. But declines in OI naturally will be higher considering it is expiry. So Ambuja Cement, Ciet and Ajanta Pharma among many others that we'll be watching out for in today's day of trade. Expect another mixed day of trade when it comes to broader markets.
There are a bunch of stocks we're looking at today. Tata Motors long-term rating has been downgraded to B+ from a BB negative by S&P. The ratings remain to watch negative. The rating agency expects cash flow to remain negative for the next 12 to 18 months before the Chinese operations stabilize and cost cuts restore its financial health, reported by Bloomberg News. NDCC receives infrastructure orders worth 1,003 crores for 5 development projects across the country. Mahindra & Mahindra Financial Services increase its stake from 88.75% to 98.43% in Mahindra Rural Housing Finance for rupees 286.78 crores. Corporation Bank EGM to issue 340.6 crore preference shares at 26.68 rupees per share, aggregating to 9,086 crore rupees to Government of India. Then we have an update on the Sheela Foam OFS. The promoters will exercise the oversubscription offer to sell 2% of the total equity capital. The OFS got subscribed 2.78 times the demand for the non-retail investors with an indicative price of 1,184 rupees per share as per the NSE website. Nelco's board approves sale of company's entire stake of 12.3% in Nelito Systems to Japan's DTS Corporation for 6.77 crore rupees. And lastly, let's have a look at the bulk deals. Heineken International acquired 74.05 lakh shares, which is 2.8% of United Breweries at 1,361.35 rupees each. And Enforcement Directorate of India sold 74.505 lakh shares, which is 2.8% of United Breweries at 1,361.35 rupees each.
Okay, couple of brokerage upgrades that have come out. First of all, Bank of America Merrill Lynch has upgraded HCL Tech to a buy from a neutral. The target price has also been raised to 1250 from the earlier 1060. They expect the organic revenues growth to improve in FY20, and this is because of two reasons. First of all, they believe that accelerated win rate in key offerings of cloud and infrastructure. That is one of the reasons. The second reason that they believe that growth will improve is because there is a fading impact of delayed deal ramps, as well as customer-specific issues in financial services as well as India segment. Bank of America Merrill Lynch says that the company is poised to gain from large deal intake. They see stable margins from the software products, and their FY20 revenue guidance implies an uptick in organic growth rate. The other company that they have upgraded is L&T Tech. They have upgraded it to a buy from a neutral and raised the target price to 1650 from 800. They're saying that it works in the under-penetrated market of engineering and R&D services. Large projects and leveraging of M&A will lift growth visibility. They expect stable margin and better pricing versus the other IT company as operating leverage and price hike offset the impact of the revenue mix.
That idea came from the pho stand down the street from the factory. We were having lunch essentially every day. One day we saw the woman tending the shop. She was grilling her spices in a pan, getting them ready to put into the broth. I wanted to reinvent myself, and I was drawn towards the tropics. I think it was from my years living in LA, I like the heat. I was looking for adventure. A little bit more cold. There's no one here to help us. We were making a new product that had never been made in Vietnam, really. At the heart of it all, we really believe in making something with local ingredients. People keep asking us, why don't you make something with nukmam or fish sauce? Anyway, that entertains the minds of many. So, I think we're gonna play around with that.
Well, now I've heard everything. Fur-flavored chocolate. What next? For now, let's look at what you'll find if you look up the website bloombergquint.com. Here are just a couple of stories. A 5-judge constitutional bench of the Supreme Court has begun hearing pleas relating to the administration of India's tribunals. The 18 petitions being heard by the bench headed by Chief Justice of India, Justice Ranjan Gogoi, include 2 petitions filed by the Madras Bar Association in 2012 and the Revenue Bar Association in 2017. And Facebook will ban content that references white nationalism and white separatism, taking a major step towards curbing racism and hate speech on the site. The social media giant's policies have long excluded posts on white supremacy, but Facebook said that it didn't apply to the same lens to expressions of white nationalism because it wanted to be able to include broader concepts of nationalism such as American pride and Basque separatism, which are linked to people's identity, in their opinion. Well, that's all you need to know going into trade today. There's a lot more coming up in just a short while, so do stay tuned. This is Bloomberg Quint.